If you've been with us before in the wake of a national tragedy, we usually perform a vigil to try and discuss ethical issues that we're having with this country, which there are a lot. And I just want to remind everyone here today that this is not something that we're trying to do to grow necessarily numbers in our church. We're not trying to grow our bank account. All donations today are going to go to the families of those affected by the shooting at Gilory. And I have to say that today, I'm a little unprepared in my speech. Not because I didn't write it until yesterday, but because I wrote it before another mass shooting happened, and then another one followed that not 24 hours later. And these mass shootings, and I actually have to augment this in my notes, we're up to 250 mass shootings for America this year. 250. Of the leading 23 countries with strict gun control, they have had 7 shootings total. Not mass shootings, shootings. Don't tell me that gun regulation doesn't work, because the math just doesn't support that argument. But we're going to talk about El Paso for a moment, because like Gilory, the culprit was yet another white supremacist, aka terrorist. They found the El Paso shooter's manifesto online, and it was very much so filled with hateful language toward people of color. The shooter's motives, from what was in the documents, was that he wanted to fight the mixing of races, his words, and stop Mexicans that are crossing the border, again, his words. Now, at some point, in my opinion, I don't know how you all feel, but I think we need to start locking up white supremacists for the criminals that they are and for the message that they spread. Because we're all in danger of these terrorists. In a state like Texas, where virtually every good guy with a gun is in the presence of a shooter, 18 people were killed in seconds. I also find it hard to believe that in America, a white man killing people at Walmart can get arrested without a scratch, but a black man selling a cigarette in the parking lot will be choked to death. The rhetoric about arming good guys with guns in the public, it's ineffective, it's idiotic, and honestly it's dangerous because it's perpetuating gun violence in this country. To Congress, we should all be united when we say, pass common sense gun reform now, damn it, pass it now. A Texas politician was quoted yesterday saying that he thinks that we should deal with the memorials before we discuss politics. The politics are the damn cause of the memorials. These shootings should be eye-opening for all of us in America. And to those in this room that consider ourselves to be woke, we must continue to awaken the masses, because we no longer have the luxury of not calling out racism and bigotry to our family members and to our friends for the sake of preserving relationships. We no longer have the luxury of not condemning the NRA as talking points uttered by family and friends. The time to make waves is now. Now, you might think that's odd coming from a church. You might think that methodology doesn't sound very Christ-like, but the Gospel of Matthew says this: "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Now that could be easily misconstrued and used to continue violent acts. But the Greek word for sword here is actually referring to the effect of a blade. And the effect of a blade, when you're slicing a piece of meat, is to divide flesh. So it's referring to the division of two people. So Jesus is literally saying, in some cases, people need to be divided. Let me explain. If racism, intolerance, injustice, terrorism, classism, sexism, and homophobia are what divides a community, then we damn well better stay divided until those horrific values are abolished. Otherwise, we can no longer call ourselves authentic followers of Jesus. Now, would I love for us to be at peace and unified? Of course. Who wouldn't? But you cannot be at peace with a group of people that want to extinguish at least 50% of the American populace. It can't be done. You got to deal with those values, and you got to stand odds against it. Now, there's another group today that should be called out to action after Gilory, besides those on the left, because last Sunday, this should have been an evangelical wake-up call. You see, at the Gilory Garlic Festival, it proved all of our assumptions about the absence of racism and intolerance in blue states like California to be both false and arrogant. The recent attack in Gilory was a sobering reminder that the sinful ideology of white supremacy is no respecter of geographic location. Now, for me, I can admit that I was wrong. Needing to alter my previous assumptions is something that I'm well accustomed to. I'm a progressive reverend. I've changed my position on evolution. I now endorse evolution. We are an open and affirming LGBTQ church. We can alter our approach. That's what separates the Christian left from the Christian right, which is hardly Christian and rarely right. And I say this, yeah, you can clap for that, it's true. I say this because certainty is a defining characteristic of fundamentalism. Generally, most white Republican evangelicals are not known for what they believe, but rather what they are absolute in not believing. They do not believe in the freedom to express certain sexual and or gender identities. They do not support access to safe abortions. They do not believe in an individual's right to protest. They do not believe in questioning military actions. They do not believe in climate change. They don't believe in evolution. They do not support other religious views. They don't believe in voting Democrat ever. They do not believe in the existence of white privilege. They do not believe the report by Robert Mueller. They do not believe in condemning white nationalists from their pulpits. And critical to my point today, they do not believe in America's need for strict gun regulations or criminalizing racist extremists. Now, as of today, the malicious occurrence that manifested in Gilory and El Paso should completely remove the luxury of legislative absolution from the minds of all Republican Christians. Because in regards to gun laws, the celebrated erroneous biblical idea of a God-given right to bear arms that's among evangelicals has perplexed me for quite some time, because there is not a single passage in Scripture that would convey that God ever gave them that right. The Bible clearly says in the Gospel of Matthew to love your enemies, not to kill them. Owning an assault rifle under the guise of a God-given right for self-defense and to kill my enemies seems counterproductive to that mandate. Amen? In fact, later in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus rebukes Peter for wielding a blade in self-defense. Jesus even theorized that all who draw the sword will die by the sword, yet evangelical Christians are by far the highest consumers of assault rifles and ammunition in America. Consequently, fundamentalists have never been able to produce sound theological reasonings, or logic for that matter, for endorsing such hypocritical behavior, even at the expense of their perspectives arming white supremacists, aka terrorists. Now, I think this is because one of the most problematic aspects of conservative Christendom today is that currently much of the evangelical populace refuses to discuss white nationalism as sinful during their worship services. Now, I've been told that that's because it's a well-intended attempt for these churches to be open to all peoples. However, this widespread epidemic of tolerance, aka white silence, in church communities is fruitless. All people are not safe or welcome in churches if bigots like white supremacists are comfortable and coddled in their intolerance. Despite the overall positive intentions that people may have in welcoming all people, that impact is negative. Now, even still, I suspect that evangelicals are silent about the dangers of white supremacy and white nationalism because these terrorists are not targeting their congregations. The American church has such a high respect for independence and self-reliance that sympathy will not often present itself to these congregations unless conservatives can picture themselves enduring an act of oppression themselves. And this is why churches will send enormous amounts of wealth to Christians starving in other countries, but they'll lock starving children in cages in our country It's why they will turn away Christians that need assistance, turn away children that need assistance in war-torn countries like Afghanistan. Unless you are one of the people they call God's elect, many conservatives often don't possess the capacity to consider the welfare of others outside of their faith tradition. However, after Gilory, I am interested to see how evangelicals navigate their historic cognitive dissonance and willful complicity preceding that shooting. Because not only was the unstable shooter once again a young white male supremacist that should have never been allowed to legally acquire a weapon, he may have also been targeting Christians. I don't know if you knew this or not. This is interesting. The Gilory shooter that I refuse to name, I'm not going to give these assholes a platform, encouraged citizens online to read a white supremacist manifesto known as Might is Right. And this noxious text is a document that demeans people of color, it demeans Jewish people and women, and declares that they are all inferior to white males. Now, we've seen similar disgusting works of literature manifest themselves online after other global atrocities. We also saw this in El Paso, too. Both the mass shooter in New Zealand that targeted Muslims and the mass shooter in San Diego that targeted Jewish people acquired and shared similar writings. Now, not surprisingly, white evangelicals did not condemn those literary works publicly, and many still did not acknowledge these attacks from their pulpits, probably because white Christians were not the intended victims. But Gilory, again, was different, because in the book that the shooter encouraged people to read online, Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, Christians are also declared to be socially inferior, and this book is a call to action against the church and all that follow the teachings of Jesus. For so long, white conservative Christians have been opposed to divisive language. They may have encouraged nationalists and Confederates to target them. They may have unintentionally endangered themselves. So it will be interesting and welcome if white evangelicals take a public stand against white supremacy now that white Christians are also being targeted. Even if their motivations are out of self-interest and selfish ambition, we need all the help we can get to banish the manifesto and the disgusting idealism of white supremacy to the darkest confines of history's pages. Perhaps now that evangelicals are being targeted, they will vote to ban military weaponry for the general public. After all, the shooter in Gilory killed 3 people, 2 of which were small children, and injured another 15 attendants in less than 1 minute. This terrorist accomplished this magnitude of devastation in mere seconds within a space teeming with armed officers. Which, by the way, the good guys with guns here were not even the ones that took him out. He shot himself. If this festival was not safe, then the undeniable truth is that there is not a space or a church in America that's secure. No matter how armed their populace or their congregation may be. After Gilory, the political values of Republican Christians is at an obvious crossroads. The question is, will they choose to navigate it? Now, my experience tells me that evangelicals will be about as willing to publicly denounce white supremacy and lax gun policies as they have been willing to acknowledge the existence of climate change, evolution, and the many, many crimes of Donald Trump. And speak of the devil, literally, I ain't done about that fool yet. 45 had the audacity to tell the people of Gilory and El Paso to be safe after this week's shooting. No one is safe in this country right now. Security is an illusion. If a concert's not safe, nowhere is safe. If Walmart's not safe, nowhere is safe. If a garlic festival is not safe, then nowhere is safe. If a mosque, a synagogue, or a church is not safe, then nowhere is safe. If a nightclub is not safe, nowhere is safe. If a college is not safe, nowhere is safe. If a military base is not safe, then nowhere is safe. If a movie theater isn't safe, guess what? Nowhere is safe. And if the schools that our children attend are not safe, there is not a goddamn safe location in this country. So stop praying for safety, Donald Trump, and start writing laws that create sanctuary. In closing, I'll say this. Trump, the NRA, their membership, and all those that are unapologetically supporting the Republican Party, even after all of these attacks in regards to gun laws, you don't get to chalk up gun violence to morality issues in America when y'all are responsible for sowing the rhetoric into society that manifested these terrorists to begin with. You don't get to do that. That privilege is not yours. We do have a moral problem in this country, and a good chunk of it is the broken right wing of American politics. All of you, the NRA, Trump, their members, their supporters, you're culpable in the deaths of every innocent slaughtered by a white supremacist. And to those on the left, which is many of us in this room, because I've been picking on the right a lot, I say this: if we are silent when these arguments for the continuation of lax gun policies and arguing about communities welcoming in white supremacists because they don't want to exclude anyone, when we're in the presence of that kind of logic, when it's audible within our circle of influence, and we are silent, then we are culpable too. We are to blame if we remain unmoved and indifferent. Enough is enough, and it's time for us all to say it together. Ban assault rifles, ban handguns, ban large capacity magazines, limit ammunition, instill psych evals and extensive background checks annually if you want to house and or buy a gun, require insurance for every weapon owned, close down gun shows, eliminate online sales, both private and corporate, and heavily regulate whatever is left. Friends, it's time for white Christians especially to get pissed off. It is time for white people of all faiths to get pissed off. It's time for us to stand up to white supremacists. It's time for white people to mobilize. It's time for white Christians to become true allies to the cause of justice for people of color. And it's time to vote accordingly, because white silence is violence. So together, let us say this: no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. Say it with me. No justice, no peace. Santa Cruz needs to hear this. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you through the wilderness and protect you through the storms. May it bring you home rejoicing at the wonders that it shows you, and may it bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors. Grace and peace to you. Actually, grace, but no justice, no peace. We'll work on peace in a little bit.